Welcome to OTF Augur demonstration part 2. Here we're sitting back at the signalserver.git, and I wanted to show you the final 3 tabs. Remember, the first 2 are driven directly off of the Git repositories that we cloned from GitHub or another Git repo location. For those repositories that sit on GitHub, we also have GHTorrent data with the current version of GHTorrent sitting in the evolution, which is one of our working groups. Activity, which is not a working group, but a place where we've placed some metrics we're playing with, and experimental, which is a place where we've placed metrics we're playing with even more. And you can see under code commits per week, we have some averages. This is a rolling 188-day average. And under closed issues, we have none. That just means that the Signal app repository is not using, the Signal server repository is just not using GitHub issues. And if you go to their site, you can see that's the case. Contribution acceptance reflects the rate of pull request acceptance. Clearly that's low. A project here, this is a project that does not accept a lot of outside pull request or have a lot of forks. Merge request durations are naturally also low. We do show some average open issues per week, hovering between 0 and 1 over the period of the project. This is likely because occasionally somebody has turned the issue feature back on before turning it off when people submit issues. Activity gives you a few more metrics: issue commits per week, pull requests per week, and experimental gives you a few more. You'll notice if there's not a metric available, which I think there was not for one of the ones on the evolution tab, we get this little investigator just saying, hey, no data, but we can look into it for you. Finally, there are 2 additional points that are really important. One, if you want to know what data might be available but is not yet on the front end of Augur, we can take a look at the implemented backend, unimplemented front end list, and you can see that there are a number of API endpoints. Where it says none, that just means we have released these recently and not updated our documentation, but that's coming soon. Our API docs are right here, and they show you how to access the API on your server. Usually that's through a port 5000. That's a typical configuration. And finally, if you're looking at GitHub repositories and you are interested in understanding something about a GitHub repository that is not listed here, but it is on GitHub, the GHTorrent database that we keep up to date allows you to search for any organization, repository, group, and you can see, voila, that information is there from GHTorrent. You obviously don't get the Git or Overview tabs because we didn't clone that data because you didn't ask us to, but you could. And then I can compare that with another GitHub repository if I'm interested in seeing the comparison. So one classic example in my demos is comparing Rails to Cake PHP. And if I hit enter there, you'll see that the red line is Cake PHP and the black line is Rails. Now, by default, in the GHTorrent data, you have some ability to do configuration. The default configuration is by Z-score, which if you have a real large project that you want to compare to a much smaller project, which is the case between Rails and Cake PHP, the Z-score gives you a relative comparison of activity between the 2 projects without making you look at the perhaps broad range of real numbers and try to draw conclusions or inferences from that information. That concludes part 2 of the Augur demo. Really great to see you. Hope to hear from you soon. And there is a lot of information in GitHub that we've done for individual other people, such as code commits, lines of code in the project, code complexity per file, percentage of different programming language types in a project, and a lot more. So we look forward to talking with you again. Thanks for listening to our demo, part 2.